Welcome to Docket Manager version 3.15. Let's cover all of the new changes and things you'll see. So if we go to production, you'll notice these three new menus here. So basically, Docket Manager has made many changes in production. So one thing Docket Manager has added is a dashboard in production with a statistical overview of the items in productions. You can reach that if you go to Stats. So these statistics, you'll see many of them, are organized into 12 different areas: priority status, jobs by due date, jobs by queue, jobs by customer, jobs by press, time by press, jobs by stock, sheets by stock, jobs by department item groups, jobs by department items, jobs by vendors, and jobs by ship type. So basically the values for total jobs or time or quantity are shown. Clicking on a link will bring up a filtered search in production for that particular area. So if we click on this one for rush, it will show me the 12 jobs that have a rush priority status. You can see here. Next, we have queue statistics. Let's go back to the dashboard. So basically, statistical views come up for each type of queue that adjusts to filtered results. So if I go into the workflow here, by clicking on a tab in production, basically relevant statistics are shown above the list of jobs in that queue. So let's look at here, and let's actually go to, well, let's leave it as this view. So if we go to bindery, and we click on the toggle stats button, this is a new button, it will bring up the statistics that are relevant to bindery. So consider it a filtered statistical search. Next, we have active user queues. So the system now shows a queue for each active user that displays all the work assigned to them, regardless of queue. So here you go into this area, active user. So basically the design around this is it should help staff in production only focus on what work they are responsible for. So it's just loading that here. So you can see here under this user, currently there are 19 jobs that this person is responsible for. Next, we've got drag and drop sorting. So this is a custom sort that's available for each workflow and active user queue. Let's go back a bit. So after selecting custom sort order, in the sort options, you can use the up and down arrows on each row to drag and drop the items into the order that you prefer. So you can basically organize the items in whichever order you want in your production queue. Moving on, we have customizable views. So this is an exciting area. So if we go to, for example, this queue here, you'll see that these queues actually have something a little different. If you click on these, oops, I've got the custom sort order still on. If you click on these little drop downs, you can see this is very similar to the summary view that we have when you're looking at a specific job. So basically, you can use HTML now to program a customizable view in production. So this should allow people many creative opportunities to make the production queues look however they want. So the fields, you have the ability to choose fields that are visible for each queue. There's filters now, the ability to choose what search filters display for each queue and the order in which they display. And for statuses, you also have the ability to choose which system or custom statuses display on production. So basically a lot of customizable views in production now. Next, we have a multi-assigned to field. So when editing an order item, you now have the ability to assign more than one person to an order item. So if you navigate to orders, and you select an order, and we just edit an item, go to edit. If you scroll down to assign to, you can select multiple people here. So these are more than one person you can assign to this order item. Next, we want to talk about queue access. So you now have the ability to give access to only the production queues that a user actually needs. This is in production settings. So again, go to settings, production, and if you edit a production queue, let's edit graphics, you can give access to different users here. So which users you actually want to see that production queue. Okay, moving on. Next we have proof approval and do options. So when setting order due options, you now have the ability to have a proof due date calculate and dates calculate off a proof approval date. So if you go to settings, order options, and under order due options, just let it load here. If you go to new or edit, you can now, let's edit the 10 days one here. If you select the proof approval date under reference date, that's what allows you to have the proof due date calculate off of the proof approval date. It's just a new drop-down option there. Next, due dates from today. So when setting order due options, you now have the ability to calculate due dates from today instead of order due or proof approval date. So here under the same modal window, you can select today under the reference date drop-down menu as well. Another change in production is activity tracking. You can now track activity for orders in your queue to see records of who is working on them and when. So if you navigate back to production, to workflow, on the actions menu on any order item, we'll just bring up an order here. You'll now see at the bottom of the actions menu, there's an activity selection. So it will basically bring up a modal window of records of who is working on this and when. So that's production. Lots of changes there. Next, let's look at files. So files, there's a lot of changes here. You see it when I hover over this, we've got these new buttons here. So first of all, we want to talk about thumbnail generation. So item files, if we hover over this one actually, this one, create thumbnail. So item files can be converted automatically into thumbnails upon upload. You can also do this manually by selecting the create thumbnail button on an item file. So this will allow you to change this PDF into a thumbnail just by clicking on that. Let's talk about some of the other buttons here. One moment. You now have the ability to delete files that have been associated with a proof record. So that's here. You can just hit delete. Let's look at the next button here, proof. If you want to create a new proof from the files that you have uploaded on an item, a shortcut icon has been added to the item files modal to quickly create a new proof. So that will allow you to do that here as well. Next, we want to talk about URLs for files. You now have the ability to provide a file URL instead of an uploaded image when adding a file. Selecting URL in the file dropdown creates a field for typing in the file URL. So you can navigate to an item. You would click on the plus button here to add a file and select URL from the dropdown. And then you can just type in your URL here. Okay, moving on. One moment. The last area for files is the ability to set a file upload as required after toggling the allow file upload on a product. So that's just a simple toggle, not much to show there. Let's talk about documents next. So let's jump into settings and documents. And we'll take a look at invoice number 1. Okay, so a few things to discuss here. So first of all, you can't really see this here, but it's important, is about tags. So tags have been reworked so that all tags and formatting work the same on documents, canned emails, and card views, like in production. So basically, we have a universal tag system now where all of these tags work together. You don't have tags that just work on specific documents. They're all universal. Next, about documents is a document change log. So a document change log can be viewed basically to examine previous changes to documents and revert them back if necessary. It's the same as what I showed you before with activity. So you would go to actions here in the document, check on activity, and you'll see a record of changes and edits that people have made to this document, and you can go back to previous documents. This is good if someone changes the document and it needs to be reverted. Next, we want to focus on editing documents. So here you might have noticed there's a few more fields. So we've got size fields now. They've added the width and height fields for users to input. We've got margin fields, so we added fields for top, bottom, left, and right margins for users to input to make changes to a document. And we also added fields for accent and font colors. So you can click on here to get the color selection for accent and font. Next, we want to look at some other things that can be generated. So there's several of these. We'll see if we can jump around to all of them. So one thing that can be generated now, one work order per item or multi-items on one work order can be generated. So let's see if I can get a good example. So if we go to make a work order, let's actually select all of these. Pick a work order design. So maybe this is a bad example, but basically in the bookmarks menu, it will show you the different multi-items, the different jobs you can select. So let's see if I can do that a different way. Go back to orders. Let's try this one. Okay, so it's not coming up at this moment, but basically the work order, you can have one work order per item or multi-items on one work order showing in here. Next, we've got documents for multiple shipments. So if we go to an order, let's see if we can find one with multiple shipments here. v3.15. So you'll see here that this actually has 2 shipments on here. So you can select multiple shipments and you can print an invoice, you can print a packing slip, or you can print a shipping label for more than 1 shipment at a time. Next, we have PDF reports for sales, taxes, AR, and aging summary. So if we go to settings and reports, see if we can get this example here. So let's see if this is a good place for that. Wrong area. Let's check out the reports. On sales, taxes, AR, and the aging summary. Okay, so let's go into this one. There we go. So here you can see we've got different report formats that you can choose from. CSV and the PDF is new. Okay. Next, you can print and email receipts on payments. So let's hop into a payment. Where's a good example? So we'll go to a deposit, an accounting, and if we go in deposits, actually, let's look at a payment. There we go. Now we can print and email the receipt on payments. If you go to this drop-down area here. And finally, you can print the stock inventory label. If you go into the stock, I believe. Let's go in this one. And under actions, you can now print an inventory label. So lots of small things that you can now generate that you could not generate before. A few additional ones that I can't visually show you, but they are changes. You now have the ability to generate one purchase order per outsourced or multi-outsourced on another purchase order, and you can also group shipping invoices. Let's look at some final additional changes. This is a good one here. If we go into our quotes, let's go into quote number 1003, good example. So now if you have any overrides, you don't have to expand everything. The quote override indication shows at the top level. So you can see here, before you couldn't see this, but now I know at a glance that there's been some people in here overriding these values. They're green. And if I click on here, like before, if we enable edit mode, you would see that someone's been in here and someone's overridden those values. But now you can see it on the top level. So it's a nice visual indicator to let you know that these values have been overridden. Sometimes that's something you want, but sometimes it's not. So this visual indicator will give you that information. Next, bulk actions. So if we go into, let's go back into our items here. Okay, it's not on every window. Basically, bulk actions have been restyled and reorganized in certain places. It's quotes. No. Let's find it. It's, I believe, in customers, contacts, and items. Yep. So bulk actions have been restyled and reorganized. They are now sorted into groups similar to other modal windows. This applies to three areas: customers, contacts, and items. So you can see here it's got the kind of organization that many other modal windows have. It should make it easier to find, especially considering how many bulk actions there are when you select things like customers, contacts, or items. Next small change, but if you go to the sales page, whoops, I was already there. If you go to the sales tab, grand totals is now viewable down here. Okay. Next, for payments, if you save and add a new payment, rather if you want to save and add a new payment, you can do that now. So let's jump into the payments. So like many areas in Document Manager, if you're making multiple things, you can basically go to the new payment and then save and add new. It makes it easier to add multiple payments. Okay, one moment. Next, we have additional links on stock view and POs. So if you go into the stock view at the bottom, these are very small changes, but now by clicking in the little view link here, you can go into the view here, or you can actually go into the view about the PO. Just makes it easier to navigate if you're in that area. Next, stock PO export. We added an export button to POs. So if you go into inventory and PO, there's now an export button. Next, we want to look at time clock totals. So total time logged has been added to time clock records. So if you go into settings, time clock, you'll see here on the top right-hand corner, we have the total time logged. This should help people if they want to get that value. Almost done. Next, we have transactional statements. So we now have the ability to print or email transactional statements. So if you go into customers, let's just do this one. You can now print transactions or email transactions, just another document type that you're able to print or email. Three more things. Now you have the online name added to stock imports and exports. So basically, if you're in inventory and you go to stock and you export, so when you export basically in the CSV file, you'll see an additional online name column that has been added, just containing that online name information. Finally, we have an auto set invoice due date, so the ability to set days on payment terms to use when calculating the invoice due date. And finally, the ability to set the queue on a product and have it copy to an order. Some of these we don't have the visualizations for those, but those are the changes. So those are all of the changes in Document Manager version 3.15. Please read the remaining parts of the training module here if you want to learn more details about those.